Hello! Welcome to our special Laracon edition of the Laravel meetup. We hot? Awesome. Alrighty, so I think most people, you're new here, right? Yeah. Nice to meet you, I'm Tom. Normally we'd have my buddy Eric here with us. He's over at Laracon, so you guys just got me today. Me, Tom Rideout. This is Eric Van Johnson. He is currently in Louisville at the Laracon conference. Our next meetup is the Downtown SD-PHP meetup. We're going to have an intro to SQL with PostgreSQL. I don't know the proper pronunciation, if it's PostgreSQL or... yeah, Postgres. That's going to be August 10th. And then our North County meetup, which is August 16th, does not have a presenter yet. So if anyone is interested in presenting, it'd be super duper cool to have a presenter. That is PHP specific, doesn't need to be anything Laravel specific, just doesn't have to be an expert in it, don't have to be an expert at anything, you just have to be interested in it and be willing to put up a presentation for it. You do get a free SD-PHP pint glass for giving the presentation. And then the next San Diego Lug group is going to be everything about Laracon. So we're going to be covering all of the happenings with Laracon, the changes in 5.3, all of the new services and packages that have been developed, and apparently some new stuff that we haven't heard about yet. We'll find out the next 2 days. Don't know the presenter for that one. Might be me, might be Eric, might be Evan. Probably going to be Evan.
I imagine it's Evan because you mentioned none of us were there.
Yeah, but he's super lazy.
Where?
Yeah, just.
I'm not telling you said that.
Oh, he's watching now.
Oh, yeah.
He'll hear me.
I think you were going for
Yeah. This is our Trello board. We can up and down vote things based on who's interested in hearing what. You can add suggestions for presentations or take a presentation from the Trello board. So we are streaming right now. That got posted last night by CARI, and then I believe it just got retweeted by CARI.net again. And I'll have to retweet that as soon as I sit back down again. But it is up and getting some promotion. Eric does most of the social promotion stuff, so I'm falling slightly behind on it. So if you see something on the Trello board that you want to give a presentation about, then just let us know. Give us a connection. You can get a hold of us on our meetup page, Slack page, or IRC. We're also available on Twitter, and our website is sdlug.com. So the news for the week, which is really just the news for today. Sure.
Is all this stuff on your meetup somewhere?
Yeah, intro.sdlug.com is where these slides are, so you just go there and you get all the information that we present right here. The big news is the open source packages that Taylor has been working on were announced today for Laravel 5.3. Scout, which is a binary text searching system for Laravel models. So now you just add a trait to your model that makes it searchable, and you can search your models. It's pretty impressive so far. Passport is an OAuth 2 server implementation, so if you want to provide your own OAuth 2 solution, then it's wrapped and done for you already. Mailable is a new interface for sending emails instead of having the closure in your mail calls. Now you can call a mail or a mailable object, and that will handle all of your processing for your mail. Notifications is a system for quickly sending messages to email, IRC, Slack, HipChat, Jira, stuff like that. So you can have your application contact you in a number of different ways if something happens that is relevant to you, new subscribers or errors that come up, things like that. And there's a whole new app directory structure, which I'm not a huge fan of yet, but apparently Jeffrey Way has said that it's really good and given a good reason why, so I'll have to hear from him.
So we're going to switch to a brand new structure?
No, the out-of-the-box structure is just smaller. So the directories which were included by default, which didn't have anything in them, are simply no longer included by default as an empty directory. When you use the artisan make commands, if it needs the directory there, it'll create it.
So we're going to have to rework stuff.
No, there shouldn't be a lot of changes going from 2 to 3, 5.2 to 5.3. Resources. This is our classic set of Laravel resources, the Laravel podcast, Laravel news podcast, and the Laravel Chats snippets, which is one of my favorites. Then the Laravel news blogs, Laravel news, Laracast, and Laravel daily. Our usual list of Twitter handles you can follow to get more information on Laravel development. And again, all of this information is on the intro.sdlug.com site. 50 tricks in 50 minutes. This was a presentation given by Yitzhak Rabin. I believe that was his name. Code Rabbi. Not Yitzhak Rabin, different guy. Code Rabbi. I keep forgetting his name. Wasn't going to do this one, but it's an easy one, so we'll just do a single one. In this tip and trick, if you have a relationship which is returning results, you can begin formatting that result from within your relationship definition. So order by or other where clauses, you can add conditionals to your relationship in the definition of your model. It's pretty simple. I use it all the time for stuff like this, how to order things by default. So, pretty handy. Shameless self-promotion time. Eric, John, and I are running a podcast. We record every Thursday and release it every Saturday or Sunday. It's pretty terrible, but it's fun to listen to, I think. I haven't listened to a whole lot of them, I've just been in them. And I'll be talking about it on the Laravel Chat Live podcast next Thursday as well. As always, our sponsors are CARI.net, which we're at right now, so huge thanks to them. And the beer...
On the site, relationship, does that also work with the pivot table as well? If you're using like a belongs to many?
Yeah.
Belongs to many.
Yeah, anything that you can do after calling the relationship, you can actually do in the relationship definition as well. And then Diego Dev, who I work for and Evan and Carolyn work for, providing the beverage refreshments and other supporting materials that we need to keep things running. So huge thanks to our sponsors. And that's it. You should be able to. So I present to you Norm with our first presentation. And then after Norm gives his presentation, I will be giving a surprise presentation about polymorphic models.
So where does CARI.net post the streaming?
On Twitter.
Oh, okay. On the Laravel, San Diego Laravel?
No, on the CARI.net, at CARI.net. I'll repost it right now. Sure.
What else?
Yeah, do you need the DVI or the mini display board?
Just this.
There you go.
So let's see if that works. Let me just check the Twitter real quick. It doesn't look like it's right. Let's try it. Yeah. I don't see anything about. Them anywhere. Alright, well, we'll just have to skip the streaming. Alright, so let me find my presentation real quick. View full screen, I guess. Right, so I'm Norm Katz. I'm not really working for anyone right now. I'm sort of independent consultant and helping a startup. So I'm not advertising who I work for. And I've been doing Laravel for about 2 years on and off. I'm working on my third Laravel project right now. And the startup that I'm helping said, use whatever you want. So of course I chose Laravel. The last two projects were on 4.2 and now I'm using 5.2. So it's kind of cool. And I wanted something to just kind of get a demo going for the customer that hopefully will be my employer someday. And I didn't want to futz around with becoming a DevOps expert and a lot of the other stuff, even though I kind of know my way around LampStack. I looked at Forge and I said I could use this. You know, it deploys to Amazon AWS, which I've been using also a couple different companies, and Spark is basically a scaffold of an app. It's actually a fully functionally running app that has e-commerce built in and authentication and stuff like that. So let's talk about Forge first. I think there was actually a Forge presentation. Thomas, you could correct me if I'm wrong, like a year ago or 6 months ago, or
Yeah, just about a year ago.
a year ago. Okay, so I don't know if any of you were actually here for that, but I'll just kind of go through this stuff. So what is Forge? Okay, it's a tool for provisioning a server, a Ubuntu server, like I mentioned earlier, and it spins up a server that has all this stuff already in there: Composer, Laravel, Nginx. It puts both MySQL and Postgres on there because it doesn't know which one you're going to need. So when you get your server booted up, you want to turn one of them off, obviously, because you're just not going to use it, or even uninstall it. I'll get to the disadvantages in a minute, but yeah, it also adds Redis if you want Redis for caching. Node.js, all this stuff here is really because you might be using, actually some of these are more involved with Spark than with Forge. I don't think it actually puts Vue.js in there, but it does put Node.js and Gulp in there. And these are the three cloud environments you could use: AWS, DigitalOcean, or Linode. I've only tried AWS, but DigitalOcean is very popular. It's inexpensive. It seems to be just very popular in the Laravel community. Okay, so Forge, which is really owned by Taylor Otwell and his Laravel company, charges you $10 a month, like Heroku would. Are you familiar with Heroku at all? Okay, so it's platform as a service, and they charge you something on top of whatever server environment. Same thing here. I think $10 a month is pretty reasonable. I'm not sure if it asks for a coupon code when you register, so I'm not sure if we can get those or not.
We can definitely get one.
Okay, that would be great, because maybe it'd be $5 a month, or free for a few months. I don't know. Okay, so what can Forge do? Forge should be for you, for me. So it gets your Laravel environment up and running quickly, so you don't have to figure out what are all the installers and all the options. It just kind of sets it up for you. It helps if you kind of know your way around Ubuntu and LAMP, but if you don't, then it depends on whether you're working for a company that has DevOps support people or you're on your own. So I would say it's a great temporary surrogate, so you don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff. But if you're ever working sort of independently, you have to spin up your own Laravel server, then you're eventually going to need to know what Forge actually does behind the scenes. Okay, and I'm not sure about the license agreement, but I can create unlimited virtual hosts inside the one server that I created with Forge. There's also like a personal edition and a team edition. Team edition's more expensive, but I'm just using it to help bootstrap a company. So I've created like 5 or 6 virtual hosts, and it doesn't complain. Taylor doesn't send me nasty emails, so I guess I'm okay. There's this really cool new SSL provider called Let's Encrypt, and Forge integrates with it, so you can actually create SSL certs for your Laravel apps right inside of Forge, and it takes care of configuring your Nginx config files for your virtual host automatically, which is really cool. And I might be able to show you a little demo of that, because I set up a server that doesn't have SSL, and we'll just add it. The problem is sometimes it takes 4 or 5 minutes for that server to come back, especially this time of day when everyone's streaming movies and stuff. For some reason, in fact, it kept crapping out on me, and so I emailed Taylor like 3 or 4 times, and he finally said, okay, I'll look at it. And he said, I'll just extend the timeout to 5 minutes, and that fixed the problem. So it's just like a really slow server out there somewhere. It's actually sponsored by Cisco and some other big companies like Symantec. So it's going to be around for a while, which is great. And I don't know how robust it is or whatever compared to the big guys, but it's, for your own little company, it's great to have free SSL certificates. Okay. If you already have your own, you could paste it in before it launches your server. And when it launches, you could have it deploy from a Git repository, either on GitHub or Bitbucket. Where am I? Okay, so you can do several things that you would do if you're building a container using Docker or whatever other container service you're used to using. And these are some of the things that you could tell Forge before it launches your server, so that it has infrastructure that you need. So if you need cron jobs, if you need certain ports opened up, then you could do all those things in advance. You could also just tell it, just run some bash script when it starts up, or start up a daemon, like an rsync daemon or something like that. Okay. Even more provisioning features, okay? It creates its own key pair, so that when it integrates with GitHub, you'll have to tell it what the public key is that your server is going to connect to pull down the repo. It lets you configure the max file upload size, which is a very common thing that you're going to configure whenever you start a PHP project. And it lets you specify what's in your .env, which holds all your database connections and your social network IDs and things like that. It lets you queue up some workers if you need some queues running all the time in advance. Instead of PHP, you could use this Facebook HHVM, which is supposed to be faster until I think 7.1 came along, and I think PHP itself is pretty damn fast for the latest version. And it does have some logging that it'll show you while it's deploying the app or the server. So just here's a few cons. I don't like the fact that it doesn't ask you if you want MySQL or Postgres. It just throws them both on there. If you're familiar with AWS, they have their own database version of MySQL and Postgres and SQL Server, all packaged in this RDS, but you can't select it from Forge. So you never want to be running in production with your database on the same server as your web server. I think that should be pretty obvious for security. So it's sort of creating a quick and dirty environment for you, but you're going to basically want to uninstall any databases on your web server. And on the Amazon side, I like running RDS because it automatically has backups every day, and you can configure it for how frequently you want to back it up. Free tier, basically, if you create an AWS account right now with one of your emails that you haven't used before, then you get 1 year free of what's called the free tier. So you can create a web server, an RDS server, a bunch of other things, and just use it for a year. But if you need performance, pretty quickly you're going to want to step up because it's like a 512 megabyte single core processor, which is actually fine for hosting websites and setting up your Laravel. But when you try to run node install or gulp, it takes 5 minutes instead of like 5 seconds. So I'm not sure why it's so slow, but it's painful. Also, Elastic IP basically means getting a static IP. So when it creates your server, it just creates an IP that if you reboot your server, you're going to get a different one. So Amazon has free static IPs for you. So you basically just create one and associate it with your server, but you have to go back into Forge to tell it what your new IP is so that you can interact with it, like adding your SSL certificates and creating virtual hosts and things like that. Okay, so on the Amazon side, before you actually have Forge launch your server, you're going to want to create a group. I call mine Forge group. And I think the only thing you have to do is give it EC2 full access, which is a policy, which is sort of a collection of privileges. There's probably something minimal besides full access, because that means it could just spin up 100 servers accidentally and you get a big bill. But that's the one that I use for my own account. I'm not sure, it might also need container service because it is actually using a container to create your server. And then you create a user that is in that Forge group. I call mine Forge. And when you create a user, it generates a key. You want to save the CSV file that it lets you download, and it has your key and your secret. And you're going to want to add that to your Forge infrastructure so that Forge can talk to Amazon in your account, your AWS account. Okay, so what I did for learning Forge was I binge watched all the videos on Forge. Laracast is your friend, and it really helped me once I actually started hands-on using it. Same thing with Spark. So That's one of the great things about the Laravel community is Taylor and Jeff Way create these awesome videos that get you usually 50% of the way at least there. I learned Laravel 4.2 like over a weekend when somebody quit my company and they dumped a Laravel project on me. I had no idea what Laravel was. So when I came in Monday morning, I felt like I could do this, just because of these videos. Okay. So Forge only gives you a 5-day free trial, and you have to give it a credit card. But like I said, there's a coupon code, so we'll see what we can get. And yeah, I mentioned the thing about the free tier. Yeah, it'll walk you through most of the initial setup. And I mentioned you have to have your AWS key and secret ready to put into it. And then you basically deploy. And when you deploy it, it'll create a server, and it'll have 2 users in your home directory, Ubuntu and Forge. Okay, you only need Ubuntu. I've never even used Ubuntu, but you can sudo to root to access your etc config files and things like that. So as soon as you create your Forge account, it will send you an email with mainly, I think I have it here, 2 items that are really important. Your sudo password, and once you have that, you could theoretically go into the sudoers file and say, Forge doesn't need a password, and then it also gives you your Forge. It creates a Forge user in MySQL and Postgres, so you don't have to think about it. It uses the same password in both too. So you're basically like set up to be super user on either one of those databases, which is slick. Okay, so then while it's running its provisioning, you'll see this spinning thing, and then it'll eventually come back and tell you either something died here or that it's finished. And then when it's finished and this provisioning goes away and it says like ready, then I log into my Amazon server right away, and I look for the name of the server that I gave Forge. And I see that it's a T2 micro, which is in the free tier. And if it's not, then if you don't want to be charged, then what you do is you shut down your server with this action menu here, and then then you can go back into the action and say change configuration and change it to a cheaper server or a free server, and then you just start it up again. But again, it'll change the IP address here. So in AWS, right along this left side, you'll see something called Elastic IP. I could probably show you later if you're interested. And then you can create one, assign it to this server, and then it'll magically appear just like this. Okay, so there's my 52.9, and then I go back into Forge, and in server details meta, I change my address and click update, and then I can go to a browser and just put in my address, and I'll see the PHP Info Screen. Okay, so it's just, magic. What I usually do right away, if I haven't created any virtual hosts yet or domain names, I'll create an SSH alias or bash alias for this address right in my bash RC, so that I just don't have to think about what's the address. Okay, so I'm going to pause there for a second. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, Forge just says no help. It's just you log in, there's like no documentation. It's just like a...
That's what the videos are for. I agree. Very little documentation, but the videos are the documentation. Yeah, I just turn it on 1.25 speed and just like skip through it if it's boring. But let me just show you a little bit of Forge here while we're here. Let's see, where did I? That's Forge. Okay. So I'll sign in. Okay, so at the top here, you'll see servers and sites. So I only have one server, and I called it Meetup. Okay, and it lets you create multiple virtual host sites. And here you can specify your SSH keys to log in as yourself. Basically, you want to make sure you log in as the forged user, because it's going to put this key in the what is it called? The authentication keys in your authenticated, yeah, in your .sh folder.
It's going to get your information from wherever it is into Forge.
Yeah, into your server that Forge produced.
The server that you created.
Yeah, your Amazon server now will let you SSH directly into it with the private key that you have on your home computer or whatever.
I don't want this. I mean, I can't figure out this, but what do you get from your dev environment to here? Or wherever it is.
With SSH or with the web. Those are your two choices.
So you just have to SSH from the Laravel control panel in your computer up to Forge then?
Or, yeah, I use like WinSCP or
Not Laravel, but just your
just your terminal, whatever terminal you have. Yeah, I use WinSCP
So in the dash
or
terminal on
PuTTY.
Laravel?
No, on your desk, on your Windows, are you using Windows?
No, you see that.
Oh, okay.
Figure out how to connect. I have a
Well, you
terminal.
should be able to SSH to your server that Forged produced from C9.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to have your private key in your .ssh folder of your C9 environment.
Okay.
Okay.
And
And this I mentioned earlier, you could tell it you want to add some daemons, and you could, basically, so you have your little firewall controller here, so you don't have to understand IP tables. It just kind of does it for you. And here's that metadata where you would actually change the IP address if it changes on your Amazon or DigitalOcean
So
server.
when you did your first server, how big? Like they say,
The smallest configuration.
could you make it bigger later?
You can, yeah. I don't think you can change it here, but you can change it on your cloud. Okay, so
You just accept the defaults.
right, pretty much. And so I have it comes with one called default. They advise that you just delete that once you create the other host that you want, because it's really just for testing to make sure your server's alive. So I created just a simple server. All it really does is creates a PHP virtual host without Laravel, but you can specify a Git repository to bring. You can use this for WordPress, for instance, to say, go bring down my whole WordPress repo. It doesn't have to be for Laravel, but that's what I use it for. And then last night I just created this spark.normcats.com, and you can see it doesn't have SSL, but if I go into it, on my sites, okay, so this is the view of, actually I didn't go there. Okay, this is to create, where I'm at. Right, I'm on my Spark site, and
Fourth tab says SSL certificate.
right, okay. So here's this thing, let's encrypt, okay? So if you click that, then you can say obtain certificate. But you have to have already created the, let's see, do you need the A record for that? I'm pretty sure you want to create the A record in your GoDaddy or Amazon or whatever you're managing your SSL with, or your domain names, okay? And then once that's done, then when you come back to your list here, you'll see that SSL is actually active. But I think it'll say installed, and then you can activate it. But once it's activated, it will already be in your Nginx config file and ready to go. So for instance, I've got spark.normcats.com, but it's HTTP, and let's see, can I do anything with that? I forget how to make it show the HTTP. But you don't see the little lock, so let's give it a shot here, and let's encrypt, and I'll just say obtain certificate. Okay, so here it says installing, and what we could do is just kind of let that go, and I'll start talking about Spark. Sorry. Okay, so what is Spark? An e-commerce out-of-the-box portal app. I would say it's mainly useful if you're a software developer or publisher where you're selling subscriptions, selling software that's available for download, or a game developer, because what I like about Spark is it has this concept of teams. So someone can buy a subscription and say, these 5 friends of mine can log in with my subscription, and they can see my portal, which is something that just would be extra work if you had to do it yourself. Spark doesn't have to be the host for your app if you're actually like a SaaS app provider, but it would make a really good portal for managing your subscriptions. Okay, so like adding your team members and changing your credit card information, things like that. Okay. So Spark is $99. There is no evaluation because once you bought it, you have the full source code. So they're not going to really give you the source code and let you change your mind. But what Taylor actually says on his video is the hundreds and hundreds of hours that went into making Spark and adding tests for it and making it fairly robust. So it's a nice starter app. It has all these features, authentication. Apparently it has two-factor authentication. I think that's just a switch in a config file, but I don't use it yet. I'll show you a little demo once it's running and with the SSL, and once you register, it lets you create your photo, or it pulls actually your photo from Gravatar automatically if your email address matches. Gravatar is just a public domain, profile picture holder, I guess, mapped to your email as a key. It has the reset password and email confirmations already built in, so you don't have to worry about all that. If you want to call the app through an API, you can create your own custom key once your account is set up. And it's integrated with Stripe or Braintree, and it supports both monthly and annual subscriptions, and you can manage your own subscriptions, or if you're the administrator, you could manage all the subscriptions that are online. And I already mentioned it supports Teams. Okay. And here's some other things. It has an announcements and notification panel. There's a support request form, so if you want to let people enter support requests right from the app. It has something called Kiosk, which is like a dashboard for developers that can access reporting pages for like your revenue metrics, your billing. Has a page to publish announcements and even impersonate users for debugging purposes if you can't reproduce something with your account. It has Socialite, which is Laravel's component for integrating with Facebook and all the social networks, but it doesn't really expose any of those features, so you have to kind of turn it on yourself. It integrates with Bootstrap, Twitter Bootstrap, CSS framework, and Gulp and Less, and it's all configured. So it builds this one giant CSS and one giant JS file with all your component files. And it uses Vue.js for like half of the pages that you see, and then it doesn't use it for others. And it doesn't really use Vue.js like pure, like a Node.js. It just uses Vue in templates that Laravel blades are the containers of. So you kind of get this fusion between blades and Vue.js. And in fact, like, you have to be careful with the curly braces because they mean two different things depending on whether you're in Vue or blades. Okay. So again, Laracast is your friend, and that's how I learned Spark before I started playing with it. Okay, so before I created my Spark, I created my subdomain, which is spark.normcats.com on my GoDaddy, and I let's see, I created the virtual host in Forge and just made sure that it was live. And then I mentioned that your database is not only installed but actually running on MySQL and Postgres. So you can set up your Spark app environment.env file with just the Forge username and password, and you're ready to go. Yeah. Sure. And there's a couple there's documentation for Spark itself, and there's also this installer for Spark, just like who uses the Laravel installer command line where you could just say Laravel app name or Laravel new app name. So you would think that with Forge that would be pre-installed, but it's not. So it was a little bit confusing for me because it doesn't say install it in the Spark, because it just assumes you're on a server that somebody installed Laravel. So that kind of was a gotcha for me. And the reason I mention that is because Spark has an installer to create a Spark app with all the stuff that comes with Spark, including pulling down the repo and everything. So, and actually setting up your key that you purchased for $99, because that's really all you get is a key. And when I tried to run, after I installed the Spark installer and I tried to run Spark command line or Spark new, it threw a bunch of errors at me. And I realized I had to put Laravel installer in there. And once I did that, everything worked great. One other gotcha was that you don't want to try installing Spark into an existing directory that's not totally empty, because it'll just like barf or it'll skip stuff. So you should create just like a virgin directory. But I made the mistake, I guess, of using Forge to create my virtual host, which creates a directory for me with a public directory and a PHP info in the index. And then when I tried to install Spark into that non-empty directory, it got all confused. So I just sort of set aside my my Spark directory and kind of swapped it back in once I had my A record all configured. Okay. Once you go through the Laravel installer, you should have be able to just say Laravel -- version, and if that works, Laravel's installed. Same thing with Spark. I git clone Spark installer, and if it's working, I get this nice little message. And then first thing you do is register the key that Spark emailed you when you paid your money. And then you're ready to go. You could also get that token back once you've registered it anytime, but just saying Spark token. And so if you want to have like 5 different Spark instances, like for dev and staging and production on your server or on different servers, you could just keep reusing the token. Again, Taylor doesn't have anything where it just like nags him about somebody's using the key a million times. Or maybe he has some threshold that like after 10 times he'll start nagging you or something. But I've never noticed any problems. Okay, so I run my Spark new, and when it takes about 2 minutes, it's just pulling down a whole bunch of crap, and it's running node install and gulp and everything. And then finally, you'll get this whole list of directories. And you want to really make sure that package.json is there and actually gulpfile.js. If you don't see package.json and gulp file, you know something went wrong. And then what went wrong for me was if my directory wasn't empty. And again, first thing I do is I go into my env, and the default env has homestead and the word secret. So I just changed that to Forge and whatever my Forge database password was from that email that Forge sent me. Okay. And then finally, when it's all finished, you should be able to go to a browser and see Spark. So let's look at Spark here. Before we do that, let's go back to Forge. And sure enough, my certificate is now installed, but I'm going to activate it. And so now it's creating my SSL, or just adding that SSL cert to my virtual host that Forge created earlier. That should really only take less than 30 seconds. So let's just give it a second here. And it also has the auto redirect. So if you come to your URL without HTTPS, it'll redirect you to HTTPS. Okay, so now it's activated, and I'll refresh my Spark. Okay, there you go. There's our little lock. So just, free certificate, installs automatically in Forge. I didn't have to touch Nginx at all. I just didn't even have to know what it was, which, I think is pretty cool. So to register, they've got it set up so that it only asks you for your name, email, and your password. It does not have strong password checking at all. It's just very generic, so that's sort of a shortcoming. But I created a user here. Where is it? Actually, let me go to the home page. Well, it's just my email. It's one of these. Let's try this one. Okay. So here you can see that when I registered, it just pulled my picture off of Gravatar. And it's just basically a generic app. It has settings and subscription management. So if I'm not subscribed yet, I'm on the trial. And so it says I'm currently on a trial until August 5th. And in order to get off of the trial, I have to enter credit card information. So what you really want to do is go into your config file for Stripe and set up your Stripe account information. And then it should just go ahead and charge right away. I think I set it up on my other server with the Stripe test account, and it worked beautifully. And then for profile, you really just have your name and email address and your photo, and You can create your own custom API key because you're now a registered user. And you can set up your payment information, and you could look at your payment history. So I guess that's about it for Spark. What else do I have here? As soon as you have your Spark app up and running, I would immediately push it to a new repo in GitHub, because otherwise you have to go through the whole process again. So then you could actually pull it down to your development environment, start changing stuff, push it back up, and then either SSH into your cloud server, or you could actually, I think, use Forge to just push your updated version of master or whatever branch you want.
Forge pushes it up, it's getting in the Forge ground.
Right. Whenever I create, or someone creates a new app for me, I always put the libraries directory in my git ignore, because it just takes up a lot of space, and that's what Composer update or Composer install is for. So that way, if you have a team, they can pull down just your bare app without all the libraries, run their Composer install, and be done. I guess just about out of time here. And any questions? There must be questions. $1 I will pay you.
I think you did a great job with this.
Oh, thanks.
Do you have a copy of this?
We're going to post it online, right?
It's still in there.
Yeah,
It sounds
right.
like-
Because if you follow my slides, then it'll kind of guide you through both Forge and Spark, I think.
But I think what happened is you ran into some gotchas there that took some time.
Oh yeah, like hours and hours in the middle of the night. You know, like that. Yeah, like painful. I mean, it all makes sense after you're done, but it's not documented real well.
Well, you got a lot of good tips buried in here.
Exactly. Thanks.
Did you get into the team management stuff as well?
No, but it's exposed through the UI, so that's one of the things that I think is there. Here's a couple other things I wanted to mention. How should you decide if you should actually use Spark or build your own app from scratch? There are a lot of other scaffolds, including some with e-commerce and most of what you see here. This is like Taylor's scaffold. So you're basically getting his code, or for whatever other scaffold you're using, you're getting someone else's code. And those are great for learning stuff, but you might not like the directory structure they chose, you might not like the design patterns they're using or things like that, or the coding conventions, or just like the way they did their schema. But it's really great if you've got a customer that says, build me a store with user authentication and have it running on the cloud.
So if you were going to do your front end page, it still has the strap page right in and all that?
It does, yeah. And there's one called Laracogs, which is actually, I forget the guy's name, but it's one of the guys that's real popular on the Laravel Chats, and he's on the what's the videos that they do once a month or once a week, Laravel Live or something like that. Laravel Chat Live, yeah, he's always on that one. He's a really cool guy. He responds to me on Twitter and answers questions. And Matt, yeah, no, the other Matt with the shorter name. It's one of the Matts. So, you could spend time learning everything about somebody else's app, but that's like legacy code. Even though it's Laravel, it's still someone else's code. But I find the experience is like you do learn how to do things that you haven't done yet, and at least somebody else has, even though you might not like the way they've done. And then, yeah, like I said, how much time do you want to spend building your own homegrown app? And there's all these other things like Gulp Browserify that I didn't really know anything about, but I didn't have to. Yeah. This is another thing. Spark has an API, so you could actually use it and put your own Node.js front end on top of it if you don't like Spark's UI.
So does that slide say that if you want it to be mobile, Spark is not good?
Yes. It's really designed for web browser first. So, yeah, it's like a portal, I would say.
So I don't understand that. Why? If it's got Bootstrap, why wouldn't it be okay to be mobile?
Oh, I would say it's definitely responsive layout, but it's all relative. You know, I don't think he designed it for mobile, so I don't know if things collapse the way you want them to. But I really see it purpose built for sort of managing a portal of subscribers. So why does that have to be mobile? That's like having a utility that you use at work on your phone, you know. Okay. Right.
Wait, it's part of the website then, because then you want it mobile.
Well, the administrative portion is
Yeah, this is more the admin portion of Spark. Okay, so what did I do and why? So I was working with this startup, and after I learned everything that I now know about Spark, I abandoned it. And the reason was I was spending a lot of time learning someone else's code, like I said, and I also hired an offshore developer. I was expecting booze, but he's really great. He's in Montenegro, which is next to Serbia, and so he's 9 hours apart from me, but he's like awesome Laravel coder, which is cool because this is, you know, a homegrown U.S. environment. And he said, you know, even he was spending a lot of time trying to figure out what Taylor's doing in Spark. And he said, I've already done this stuff like 10 times. So can't I just use my own thing? You know, I'll make it look exactly like Spark. And I said, okay, go for it. Okay. So, yeah, and there were things in Spark that I really didn't need, and I thought I needed them in the beginning. And then there's things I needed that weren't really in Spark. Like if he did a better job actually integrating with Facebook and social networks for both the what do you call it, the auto registration, the OAuth, you know, and login, or just social posting icons and stuff just to kind of show you it's done, then I would have said, yeah, this is great. But to sort of advertise socializes in Spark, but there's nothing there, I thought that was a little cheap. Yeah, so you might have really great success with Spark. So if you need to build up a store that basically just sells monthly recurring subscriptions, and it doesn't need a fancy UI, and it just gives those users access to pages once they've paid or during the eval, then it's probably good enough. Okay, and just a reminder that Aricast is your friend. Thank you very much. And I'll be available for questions after, but I'll be
What would the process be like, considering if I put these out, what would be the transition with transitioning to Spark app to
Well, let's see. I haven't really done a formal upgrade, but will Composer upgrade your Laravel?
Composer, well, there is a tool that's out there that you can use to upgrade for
Okay.
also considering that the files are being to the browser taking out
yeah.
is it something where you need a tool specifically if you want to transition or
With 5.3,
yeah,
month or so. Because since these are Taylor's products and he makes money off of them, he'll probably want to upgrade them eventually. Yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah, like, I'll answer any other questions later on.
We don't have a Forge code, promo code,
Okay.
but trying to get Eric to grab all these physical presence of Taylor. Yeah.
Do you have another presentation that you're doing?
That has still on here, a quickie about polymorphic models, or do you think we should save that for next time and grab this one?
Yeah, I kind of ran over by probably.
That's perfect. Fantastic presentation.
Oh, thanks.
I'm interested. I mean, so,
Yeah, I think you were pretty tired for a day.
Actually, I just wanted to show one more thing. Like, you do your tips at the beginning of every thing. When you first install your Laravel app and you start using it, you have your Laravel log file, and like before you know it, if you're doing a lot with it, it grows to several megabytes. So if you're not familiar with Log Rotator, it's built into Linux, and it's just not a lot of people know how to use it, but it's like super simple. So I like forced myself to figure it out, and I just put a little Log Rotator file in my Etsy logrotator.d called Laravel, and then you can put a rotator for all of your different Laravel apps all in the one file, and then it'll just every day. I've got mine configured so that if it's less than like 20 megabytes or 20 kbytes even, it'll leave it alone. But otherwise, it'll just create a new version, just like your syslog, every day. So that's one of the first things I do now when I set up a new virtual host, is I add that host to my log rotator file. And then the other nice thing about it is when you're doing a grep-r for something, and it happens to go into your logs directory, you can exclude it from anything but .log, because it just puts some other extension like .1, .2, or the date at the end of it. So let me see if I could find that real quick. Oh yeah, I'll show you what I mean. Okay. Do I have it in this one? Oh. This one, Seekster is the name of my startup. That's probably not real clear, so let me just grab it. Grab a couple of these and put them in here and zoom in. Okay. So, in Etsy logrotator.d, you create a file, and then you put these blocks of instructions. And this basically says in my.seekster.com storage log star.log, which is really laravel.log, you could just use that instead of star. I want to create my new log file, my backup files with Forge user and Forge group. I want to only do it if the size has gone larger than 50K. At least once a week, and if there is no log file, don't do an error, just skip it. Every 24 days, throw away the oldest ones. Compress it when it creates the backups, and if the file's empty, just ignore it. And then, yeah, again, create. I'm not sure what SU Forge is, but the difference between that and the create. Oh, this is just set the mode to 755. Okay, so like I said, you could basically set all of your Laravel app paths in here, and then the cron's already running in log rotate. It's like built into Linux. So it just makes your active log file as small as you want it to be. And then you could always go back to your other ones and just use gunzip, I guess, is probably what it uses to get to your old ones. So there's your tip of